Imagine a king right at the peak, seemingly, and then suddenly facing not just defeat, but total collapse. That's kind of the jarring picture we get in First Chronicles, looking at King Saul's final moments.
It really is stark, isn't it? Because Worst Chronicles often focuses on, the high points, the victories in Israel's history. But chapter 10 gives us this really raw look at loss and, importantly, why it happened.
Right, and that's our focus for this deep dive, specifically First Chronicles Chapter 10, the account of Saul's death.
Yeah, we're using the biblical text itself, obviously, and looking at some analysis that helps unpack it all.
Our mission, if you like, is to get beyond just the historical facts and really figure out what this ancient story is telling us about leadership, faith, our choices today.
Exactly. It's not just history class. There are some timeless principles here, I think, that still hit home.
Okay, so let's get right into it. First Chronicles 10, what actually happened? Can you walk us through the events?
Sure. So the chapter basically throws us right into the thick of it. A huge battle on Mount Gilboa, Israelites versus Philistines.
And it doesn't go well for Israel.
No, not at all. It's a crushing defeat. The Israelite army just breaks, scatters, many killed right there on the mountain. And the Philistines, they zero in on Saul and his sons. And tragically, Jonathan, Abinadab, Malchishua, Saul's sons, they're killed.
Wow, all three of them in that battle.
All three. A devastating blow right at the heart of the kingdom. Then things get even worse for Saul himself. He's hit by archers, badly wounded.
Okay.
And he sees capture coming. He's terrified of falling into the hands of the Philistines. The uncircumcised, he calls them, fearing torture, humiliation.
The king's worst nightmare, really.
Absolutely. So in desperation, he turns to his armor bearer and asks him, pleads with him, really, kill me with your sword.
Did he do it?
No. The text says the armor bearer was too afraid, or maybe too loyal, perhaps. He refused. So Saul, seeing no other option, takes his own sword and falls on it.
Oh, wow. Suicide.
Yes. And then, seeing his king dead, the armor bearer does the same thing, falls on his sword, and dies right there with Saul.
Just utter devastation. The king, his sons, his intendant.
The chapter really emphasizes the finality. So Saul died, and his 3 sons and all his house died together. It was a complete wipeout for the royal line in that moment.
And what about the wider impact?
Well, the Israelites living in the nearby valleys saw the army fleeing, heard about Saul. They just abandoned their towns, packed up and left.
So the Philistines just walked in.
They did, moved right in. And the next day, they're going through the battlefield, stripping the dead for spoils.
Standard practice, unfortunately.
Right. And they find Saul and his sons. And what they do next is, well, it's brutal. They cut off Saul's head, take his armor.
Oh, man.
And they send these trophies, his head and armor, all throughout Philistia. It's like a victory tour, proclaiming their win to their idols, to their people.
A message of total dominance.
Exactly. They put his armor in the temple of their gods and fasten his head up in the temple of Dagon. Maximum desecration, maximum propaganda.
Just awful. Is there any positive note in this chapter?
There is, actually. A remarkable act of courage. The men from a place called Jabesh-gilead, they hear what the Philistines did to Saul's body.
Okay.
These valiant men, the text calls them, they travel all night, likely through enemy territory, retrieve the bodies of Saul and his sons, presumably from the wall of Bethshan, where they might have been displayed, bring them back to Jabesh.
That's incredibly risky.
Hugely risky, but they bring them back, they burn the bodies, maybe to prevent further desecration, bury the bones under a special tree, and then fast for 7 days and mourning.
Wow. That speaks volumes. Why would they do that, especially after Saul's failure?
It's powerful, isn't it? Maybe remembering how Saul had rescued them years before. It shows this deep respect, maybe for the office of king, or just basic human decency, even in the face of his tragic end.
Okay, so that's the narrative. But then the writer, the chronicler, adds something crucial, right? An explanation.
Yes, and this is key. The chronicler explicitly says why Saul died. It wasn't just bad luck or military failure. He says Saul died for his transgression that he committed against the Lord.
What transgression specifically?
2 things mentioned. Not keeping the word of the Lord, disobedience to specific commands earlier in his reign. And second, crucially, consulting a medium, someone with a familiar spirit, to seek guidance.
Instead of God.
Instead of inquiring of the Lord. That was the final straw, it seems. And the text states the direct consequence. Because of this, the Lord put him to death and turned the kingdom over to David.
So it frames the whole military defeat within a bigger picture of spiritual failure. That's sobering.
It is, and it's where we start to see these enduring principles emerge.
Like what? What's the ancient wisdom here?
Well, first off, it hammers home that spiritual failure undermines earthly power. Saul's defeat wasn't just about the Philistines being stronger. His own spiritual compromise, his disobedience, his turning away from God that's presented as the root cause.
So your relationship with God directly impacts your effectiveness, your security, even as a leader.
That's exactly the implication. True strength isn't just military might or political savvy. It's rooted in something deeper, spiritual integrity.
Okay. What else?
Second, look at the men of Jabesh-gilead. Their actions highlight respect for leadership, or at least the position, even when the leader fails spectacularly.
Right. They honored his remains despite everything.
Yes. It's a call to respect the office, maybe, or just basic human dignity. Even when you disagree with or are disappointed by the person, it's not about endorsing the failure, but recognizing something beyond the individual's flaws.
That's a tricky balance, but important.
Very. Third, God values humility and dependence. Saul turning to a medium. That was him trying to find answers outside of God. It shows the danger of abandoning that reliance, that trust. It was the ultimate breakdown in his relationship with God.
Trying to control things himself, essentially, when he felt God wasn't answering.
Precisely. Seeking substitutes instead of waiting on or trusting God. And finally, legacy matters. The chronicler focuses so intensely on Saul's end. It reminds us that how we finish our final actions, our faithfulness over the long haul, that massively shapes how we're remembered.
It's not just how you start, but how you cross the finish line. So these are powerful ideas. Spiritual integrity, respect, dependence on God, finishing well. How do these connect to us, living our lives today?
Oh, they're incredibly relevant. Take that first one. Don't let power replace prayer, essentially. Anyone in a position of influence today, business, family, church, anywhere can fall into the trap Saul did. Relying on your own smarts, your status, your connections.
Forgetting where true strength comes from.
Right. Forgetting to seek guidance beyond yourself. Saul's story is a huge warning. Real influence needs humility, needs accountability, ideally to God.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the others?
Well, the idea that your choices echo beyond you. Saul's disobedience didn't just affect him, it devastated his family, weakened the whole nation. It's a reminder for us, isn't it? Our decisions, even private ones, ripple outwards. Integrity matters everywhere.
We're all connected.
Definitely. Then there's the Jabesh-gilead example. Honor others, even in their failure. In our polarized world, it's easy to just write people off when they mess up or when we disagree. This calls us to show basic human respect, recognize dignity, even if we condemn the actions.
It requires a certain level of maturity, doesn't it?
It does,
Yeah.
compassion. And then when you're lost, seek God, not substitutes. Saul went to a medium because God felt silent. We do that too, don't we? Maybe not mediums, but we turn to unhealthy distractions, bad advice, quick fixes.
Anything but patiently seeking God through prayer, wise counsel, scripture.
Exactly. It's the temptation for the easy answer over the right one. And finally, that point about finishing well. Saul started with promise, but the end was tragic. It reminds us that we get to choose every day how we're running the race. We can prioritize faithfulness right to the end.
So reflecting on Saul, this tragic figure, how does that actually strengthen our faith? It seems quite negative on the surface.
That's a fair question. I think it works primarily as a cautionary tale. It shows us really clearly the serious consequences of drifting from God, of disobedience. It motivates us to stay close,
Okay, so it highlights the importance of that relationship.
Definitely. It underscores why we need to consistently seek God's guidance, stay humble, especially if we have any kind of influence. Don't repeat Saul's mistakes. But then you also have the positive example of the Jabesh-gilead men. Their courage, their compassion, their respect. Those are godly values shining through even in a really dark time. It shows that faithfulness is possible even when things are falling apart around you.
Like a counterpoint to Saul's failure.
Exactly. And the bigger picture, God turning the kingdom over to David, reinforces his sovereignty. Even amidst human sin and failure, God's ultimate plan moves forward. He's still in control.
That brings a level of hope, actually.
It does. It reminds us that God's story is bigger than any one person's failures. And that emphasis on finishing well, that encourages us as believers to keep going, to stay committed throughout our whole lives. Faith isn't a sprint. It's a marathon.
Persevere.
Right. And ultimately, Saul's story drives home where true security lies. Not in ourselves, not in worldly power, which is fleeting, but in depending on God.
So if we boil it down, the main takeaway seems to be the massive real-world impact of our spiritual choices.
Yeah.
Saul's story just lays that bare, doesn't it?
It really does. It connects our inner life with God to everything else. So maybe a final thought for you to chew on is this. Think about your own life. Where are you tempted to rely only on your own understanding? Where might you be looking for substitutes for God's guidance? And then how can you actively choose humility today? Choose dependence on Him. Make those small, consistent choices that help you, by His grace, finish well.
That's a challenging but really vital question for all of us. And this, we look at 1 Chronicles 10. Yeah, it's about a tragic end, but it really does offer some deep wisdom for navigating our own lives with hopefully more faith and more wisdom.